Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new video in Introduction to the Finite Element Method series. In this video we're going to be talking about something called the 3D beam equations. In other words, a beam arbitrarily oriented in space. We are talking about 3D and not 2D. Especially today we're going to be talking about the derivation at least of the transformation matrix, because it's one of the key features of 3D beams. There is a lot of theory today, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Alright, now to start with, I need to remind you what a beam is. In this case, if you have a 3D beam, this becomes a generalistic bar. A bar element is basically a generalistic element. Let me just draw something in 3D for you. If this is a bar element, you can do everything to it. You have the local x-axis, the local z-axis, which is this way, and the local y-axis. Oddly enough, in Dariel L. Logan's book, your z is your in-plane bending moment axis, and your y is your out-of-plane bending moment axis. This is kind of strange, because in programs like Robot, it uses x local for the local x-axis, y local for the in-plane forces bending moment, and the z local for the out-of-plane forces bending moment. Now, each of those axes can have a force or a moment. A force on the local x-axis is going to be the compression or tension, i.e. the forces on a column, axial forces. The moment around the local x-axis is going to be your torque, your twisting moment. The forces on the z-axis are going to be your out-of-plane shear, which can result from a wind load. And the moment around the local z-axis is your in-plane bending moment resulting from vertical loads of y. Notice that y is the vertical axis in this book. About y, a force in the direction of y down is, well, we guessed it, a shear force. A moment around the y is going to be the out-of-plane bending moments. Now, to try to formulate the stiffness matrix here, it's basically nothing new for you. You know that there is a beam equation in 2D space, and we're going to use it 2 times. Because there is a space of x dash and z dash, this 2D space, where you have a force in z, a shear force in z, which causes a moment around the y-axis, and that's why you can see here bending of the, like bending x dash z dash plane means that the element is subject to forces in this horizontal plane. So of course this will cause Fz to be created and will cause My. This is the first type of beam bending. The second type of beam bending is the x dash y dash beam bending. This is basically the gravitational beam bending, if I want to call it like that, in the local axis. Meaning, if I have this, we're talking about this plane, x dash y, x local and y local. A force applied on the y local will bend around the z local. Once again, it's a perfectly fine beam equation which we talked about in previous videos. I will link the video of the beam theory on the top right. Then, you have the axial component, which is the axial force. This is basically a truss equation. I've explained this before, and I will once again link a video up. It's AE over L, which is the stiffness of the truss, 1 minus 1 minus 1, 1. Finally, you have the moment, and notice something strange. It seems there is a strong connection between the shear in Z and the moment in Y, which makes sense. There's a strong connection between the force in Y and the moment around Z, which makes sense. But there is some sort of disconnect between the axial force in X and the torque in X. And that's the reason why you have smaller matrices for those two things. Now it says here that the matrix of the torque, i.e. the theta around Z, Gj over L, 1 minus 1 minus 1, 1. This is eerily similar to the truss equation, and I need to derive it for you. You know from mechanics of material that delta equals PL over AE, where P is the axial force, L is the length, A is the cross-sectional area, and E is the elastic modulus. So, of course, I can rewrite this into saying P equals AE over L multiplied by delta. So a force equals a factor multiplied by the displacement. That's why this is the stiffness, and that's why you have this here. The 1 minus 1 minus 1, 1 has been explained before in a spring and truss videos. I linked the truss video before, and I will also link the spring video here. Now for the torsion, I want to remind you of the mechanics of material equation that says phi T L over J G. Now if you rewrite this equation, you will get that T equals J G over L multiplied by phi. Once again, you have your stiffness coefficient here, which will give you the similar stiffness matrix. Of course, here it's written very quickly, but now you get the derivation. Alright, so if you expand your matrix, you get this 12 by 12 stiffness matrix. Yes, things are getting out of hand because our elements are getting harder, progressively larger. And that's why I have a note here that, from now on, you should have some abilities in any mathematical tool that is able to deal with matrices, like MATLAB, Octave, or Mathematica, any tool that allows you to deal with matrices and large computation. You can see the ingredients of the submatrices here. For example, those 4 elements are the truss equation. The other 4 elements highlighted are the torsion equation. The elements highlighted now are the elements of bending around a certain axis. And notice IY, because each axis has its own inertia that it resists. Of course, the remaining elements I have not circled yet are the bending around the next axis. See, you have 12 degrees of freedom because each point now can move in 3 directions and can rotate about 3 directions. Each point has 6 degrees of freedom. Having 2 points means you have 12 degrees of freedom, and that's why your matrix today is 12 by 12. The rest of the derivation should follow the similar pattern. K global equals the transformation matrix transpose, K local transformation. So I will focus on the transformation matrix as my second topic of today. The transformation matrix gives you this big thing. What he's trying to tell you is that the transformation matrix is a 12 by 12 matrix having 3 blocks of 3 by 3. There are values in the blocks, 3 by 3 blocks. What about the rest? The rest are zeros. Now, why do those 3 blocks exist? Before I explain that, what are those 3 blocks? It gives you yet again a 3 by 3 CXX, CYX, CZX, some sort of cryptic stuff that I will explain in a moment. Now, what is this lambda? If you remember back here, you can see there is a pattern. Local X, displacement, local Y, displacement, local Z, displacement. And then local X, rotation, Y, Z, rotation. You can see X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. So each one of those things needs to be transformed. This transforms the displacements in the X, Y, Z for the first node. This transforms the rotations X, Y, Z for the first node. This transforms the displacement X, Y, Z for the second node. And this transforms the rotation X, Y, Z for the second node. You can see me explaining this here. So basically, each lambda is responsible of one set of X, Y, Z, from global to local and so on. To explain how this works, the book just goes full on haywire on how to explain that. And it tries to explain to you CXX as this L over D, M over D, and so on. You can check out the book and take a look on the derivation. I have an easier way and a more understandable way to explain this. The way of the book is a simple programmatical way. My way is an understanding way. The idea of this lambda is basically that the first row represents the unit vector of local X. The second row represents the unit vector of the local Y. And the third row represents the unit vector of the local Z. So the unit vector of local X in the global axis sense. But wait, I'm talking about the local axis, but I have not talked about how the local axis look like. Allow me to show you. In Jarir al-Logan, he assumes the local x-axis to be from the start to the finish. He assumes that the local y is always perpendicular to local x and global z. If you have 2 vectors and you cross-product them, you get a third vector that is perpendicular to it. So if I say it's perpendicular to local x and global z, to find the local y, all I have to do is to cross-product x and z. It's different than the robot, and you can see the difference here. The local z-axis, well, you have local x and local y, so the local z-axis is perpendicular to both, so cross-product them and you get your local z. But there is a slight problem. We are saying to find the local y, you'll have to cross-product local x with global z, a cross-product. Now you know that from geometry, you know that the cross-product doesn't work if 2 lines are parallel, because the cross-product in that case is 0. So there is a special case. If the local x is parallel to z, either in the positive or in the negative direction, then the cross product is 0 because x is parallel to z in this case. X local is parallel to z. In this case, the directions have to be assumed, and Daniel proposes those assumptions. You want to find local y, which equals the global z cross the local x. The problem is that those two are parallel. So what he's doing is, he assumes local y to be 0i plus 1j plus 1k, 0k, uses this to find the local z. You can see the local y parallel to the global y in both special cases. Fine. Let's put this to the test. So I'll try to keep my video a little bit short because there is so much theory behind that. So I need you to sit down at home with a pen and paper and try to follow this. I will try to explain to you how to find the lambda today in this example and how to find the corresponding transformation matrix. For this example, I give you an x-axis like this, a y-axis top, and a z-axis going perpendicular to the page. So the z-axis is going towards you, dear viewer. The element here is between node number 1, which is 0, 0, 0, and node number 2, which is 3, 4, 12. The mission here is to find lambda. Now the book solves it. This is example 5.7. You can check it in the book if you want an alternative solution. I want to solve it simpler. First of all, I need to find the local x-axis. I need to find the vector, a helper vector, from 1 to 2. And a vector from 1 to 2 is basically 2 minus 1. You know this from physics. Any vector is its end minus its beginning. So 3 minus 0 is 3i. 4 minus 0 is 4j. Similarly, 12 minus 0 is 12k. This is a vector parallel to the x because it's from start to finish. So I need to find the length of 1, 2, which is basically Pythagoras, 3 square plus 4 square plus 12 square under a square root, and this equals to 13. Now I can find my local x, which is 3 over 13 I plus 4 over 13 j plus 12 over 13 k. This is what you see here. This is the local x vector. Now to find the local y vector, I need to cross product z with x. Notice that the order is important because x cross y gives you z, y cross z gives you x, and z cross x gives you y. Now this z is the global z. The global z has a unit vector of 0, 0, and 1k. Of course, we know from physics and mathematics that the cross product is being found by a matrix notation like this: ijk, the first vector, the second vector. Solving it gives you negative 0.3 I and 0.23 j and nothing in k. This, however, is not the unit vector. I have to find its length, this is Pythagoras, and divide the vector over the length to find the unit vector. And this is unit vector of y. I have to find the local z. This is basically by cross-producting x and y, something that was done here. This is the unit vector because its length is 1. So I have my 3 unit vectors. I can construct my lambda matrix. This here is the unit vector of x, local. This here is the unit vector of y, local. And this here is the unit vector of z, local. And those values correspond to the values in the book of Daniel and Logan. Now, I don't know about you which approach you like more. For me, I personally like my approach. The transformation matrix is going to be basically those values copied and pasted here, here, and here, and here, with all the other blocks being zeros. With that being said, I want to give a huge 3-dimensional frame-sized shout-out to our dear channel members in the contributor level and the helper level, whose names are going to be shown on the screen. I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart, as their contribution to the channel is priceless and helps me maintain the videos I'm trying to maintain. I know I might be a little bit late this week, but I just moved out and shifted my house to a new house, so it's a little bit crazy. I'm trying my best to keep up my schedule as usual. With that being said, I hope that you liked the video and that it was beneficial for you. Of course, if you liked it, then please share, comment, like, subscribe, and so on, especially subscribing, because it helps increase the reach of my channel. As per usual, this is the Civil Engineering Essentials channel, and we'll catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.